We mentioned at the very beginning, today we celebrate two things, well, not two things. We celebrate a person. We celebrate Our Lady under a particular title, Our Lady of the Angels. But we also celebrate a building, basically, a tiny little church in Assisi that has a very particular history in a special place in the heart of all those who follow in the way of St. Francis, or Francis of Assisi, more correctly, but also Francis himself. Near the end of his life, so anyway, this church, right? So this is like a tiny little church. It would probably fit easily in the sanctuary here. It's tiny, right? Now, it was built on the plain below the town of Assisi, in a little village, strangely called Our Lady of the Angels. So hence the name of the little church. And it was and is owned by the Benedictine monks on Mount Sabazio, which is the mountain above Assisi. There's a great ancient monastery up there. And the monks of that monastery owned that chapel, that church, right? But by Francis's time, it had been abandoned. It had been abandoned and was indeed falling down. We're all familiar with the story of Francis coming to not the church we celebrate today, but another one like it, San Damiano, and praying before the cross, the San Damiano cross, that we have an image of here, right? And the Lord, in that mystical experience, the Lord communicating to him, Francis, rebuild my church, which you see is in ruin. And he looked around and said, yeah, this place has fallen down and needs at least a coat of paint, right? So he fixed that one up. And then he looked around and said, a little further down, away from Assisi in the valley, was this other broken down, fallen place, the Portiuncula, Our Lady of the Angels. It's that church that becomes, in a certain sense, the spiritual heart of what became the Franciscan order, understood very broadly, right? Not all this, friars minor business and all that, those details that I don't know who cares about these days, but, all those legal things, not so much, right? But the movement, the spiritual movement, and that's what's important, right, was really founded in a certain sense in that location. And it was a place very special to the heart of Francis. So much so, 2 points, and there is a point to the points, right? It is said near the end of his life that he instructed his brothers to never leave this place, never leave the Portiuncula. If they chase you out of one door, come in the other one. Never leave this place. Now, whether he said that or not is not of all that much interest. It's just a way of communicating how important this was, not only to Francis, but also to the brothers of his time. Right? Why? Good question. The answer can be found, I think, in his last writing, really. And he didn't really write it himself, but he left a testament. Like we have a last will and testament. You kind of say your piece before you go and go meet Jesus, right? Well, he did that. And in that text, it was addressed to the brothers, to the friars, right? And in that text, he encourages them very strongly to never forget that they are strangers and pilgrims in this world. Right? Strangers and pilgrims in this world. When you bring that together with his great love for the Portiuncula, it all makes sense, right? Because the Portiuncula was not a property owned by the friars, Francis, the brothers, nobody. Even to this day, from a legal perspective, it's still owned by those monks up on the mountain. Right? And once a year they have this little show where the abbot comes down and the friars, and the Portiuncula is a ministry of the OFM friars, the Order of Friars Minor, the brown guys, right? The brown guys without the pointy hoods, if you keep that all straight. Right? But once a year, the abbot comes down and the friars of the Porciuncula present the rent, which is a basket of fish and some olive oil. It's a pretty good deal, right? I don't know if they get more fish every year or not. It's not clear, but they do get a basket of fish, and that's the rent. They don't own it. They still acknowledge that the Benedictine monastery owns this place. They are strangers there. And in fact, in Francis's day, the only building there was the church itself. The brothers themselves lived in these huts made out of wood and sticks and mud and branches and trees and things. And everybody had their own, right? Like little kind of camping out around the church, right? Temporary structures, right? Nothing that anybody would want. Right? They were strangers in that land. Right? But they were also pilgrims, right? Francis talks about these little places, and these places were why? What were these places for? They were to sleep and to pray. Right? That's where the friars went to pray, right? Gathered around this beautiful, tiny little church where they would gather for liturgy. Right? They were people of prayer. They were men of prayer. Strangers and pilgrims. Right? The Porciuncula is a beautiful symbol of that life. Right? It's a place they did not own and a place they did not have permanent accommodations. Now, you should see it now. That's another story. But back in the day, and there's beautiful, actually, little depictions of this, some very old drawings of this tiny little chapel with all these little hovels around it, with a big kind of fence, a hedge around it, right? A place of pilgrimage, a place of prayer, a place that was not their own. I think in that image, Francis calling his brothers to be strangers and pilgrims in this world is a message addressed to us as well, because we are the same. We are strangers and pilgrims in this world. Right? We are strangers and pilgrims in this world. This is not our home. This building has been here for almost 90 years, but for billions of years before that, it wasn't here. Right? In fact, other things were here. Over there was a chapel. It's gone. Things come, things go. Right? Friars come, friars go. The use of this building has changed dramatically over 90 years. It's been all kinds of things. Right? It's not about the building. Right? As beautiful as it is. Right? But this is not our home. Right? This is not our home. We are strangers in this world. We are all strangers in this world. Nobody's here forever. Thanks be to God, right? After the last 18 months, you want to sign up for that? Right? Here, you can live this for for eternity. How you like? That's a great idea, huh? I'm not going to get many takers on that one, I don't think. Right? But we are pilgrims, right? We're not just blowing through. We're not just tourists either, right? Many people come here and they look around at the buildings and it's, oh, this is beautiful, right? And they go home and it's like, well, they saw that. Right? We're not tourists in this world, right? We're not here to see things and get T-shirts, right? Spend money, right? We're here on a journey, right? And right now, you're taking a little break. You're all seated here very patiently waiting for this to end, right? Right? We're taking a break with the Lord, right? But we see ourselves on a spiritual journey of life. This is not our home. We're going someplace else. Right? And Francis was very aware of that. He lived in an apocalyptic age. He lived in an age when people thought the end of the world was coming soon. And that colors how he looks at everything, right? Now, they were wrong in a certain sense, but the reality is one day that day will come. Either corporately or me individually or you individually, right? One day they will haul me out of here feet first. And that's the end of that. But it's the beginning of the real life that we've been called to. Pilgrims and strangers. Strangers and pilgrims. A beautiful image for Our Lady. She understood this completely. That was her spirituality as well, right? She did not look after, she was not the center of her own universe, as we heard in that beautiful gospel story. We hear this story all the time, right, throughout the year. It occurs many times, but it never gets old, right? This simple woman of prayer. Because what's she doing when she's talking to God's angel? What is she doing? She's praying. A woman of prayer. And, in fact, a little bit later in Luke's gospel, she offers that beautiful prayer of the Magnificat, which unfortunately gets turned into the Communist Manifesto for people sometimes. It's not what it's about, right? It's not about fixing this world. It's about the God who came into the world, into the womb of the Virgin, to save us from this place, right? With all its problems. And hopefully to make it a little better than it was. But Mary was forward-looking, and this was not her home. She understood that. And that's a radical idea in her world. Right? Jews of her time didn't believe in the resurrection for the most part. Some did, but not all, and the people in power certainly didn't. The priestly class, right? The Sadducees, the scribes, and the law people, they didn't believe in resurrection. For them, this was it. Right? At best, you lived in the memories of your children and your children's children and all that business. Right? Right? But Mary lived in a world where changed that, right? Where eternal life was offered to us. And it was offered to her. And because of her, yes, thanks be to God, that's been offered to us as well. Right? We are pilgrims and strangers. We're on the journey. We've come here to be fed. Right? And we will leave this place, hopefully, strengthened, nourished, and ready to continue our pilgrimage. Right? Longing for the day when we truly come to our home.